All right, so you're ready to dive in. You've got those excerpts from Neville Goddard's I Am Called by Thy Name, O Lord lecture all set, and you're looking for the real meat, right? The stuff that flips your perspective.
That's exactly what we're here for today.
We're going deep into Goddard's interpretation of name in the Bible, and not just any name, the name of God.
It's more than just some theological puzzle. This
Mm.
stuff has a real impact on how we live our lives.
We're focusing on this specific lecture, really digging into his perspective.
Yeah, and right off the bat, Goddard starts with Jeremiah 15:16. Thy words were found, and I ate them, and thy words became to me the joy and delight of my heart. For I am called by thy name, O Lord, God of hosts.
Mm.
He sees this powerful progression happening here. You find the words, internalize them, really absorb them, and that leads to a pretty profound realization.
Okay, but hold on. This idea of eating the words, what does that even mean? It's got to be more than just reading, right?
Definitely. Goddard's saying it's about realizing that you, the person taking in these words, are actually the cause of everything happening in your life. Like, you're the one orchestrating your reality.
Whoa. So by truly understanding Scripture, you discovered this hidden power within yourself to shape your own reality. That's a huge concept.
Right, and he compares it to how we eat food. We take in what nourishes us, what's useful, and get rid of the rest.
So we should approach the Bible the same way.
Exactly. He's saying we often get stuck on literal interpretations, focusing on specific people instead of the principles they represent. Like in Nehemiah 8:8, it talks about reading the law clearly so they understood. It's about going deeper, comprehending the real meaning.
Okay, that makes sense. But then it brings up a big question. What's the name that actually gets a response? We hear about the strong tower and the promise that God will answer those who call upon his name, but
You've probably tried praying or asking using certain names and felt nothing, like no one's listening.
I have, yeah. Like, what's the right name then? And what about that promise in John 14:13? Whatever you ask in my name, I'll do it. If that's true, maybe we're using the wrong name.
That's what Goddard's getting at.
So, for Goddard, a name in the Bible isn't just a label. It reveals the character of whoever it belongs to, whether it's a person, an angel, or even God himself.
Which makes the story of Moses and the burning bush in Exodus chapter 3 even more important. Remember when Moses asked God for his name so he can tell the Israelites who sent him? And God says, I am that I am, and I am has sent you.
That's powerful. And Goddard doesn't see this as just a name for that one moment. He says, I am is the name of God forever, for everyone.
It's timeless. It applies to all of us.
So if God's name is I am, how do we connect with that?
Goddard says the most authentic way to worship, to connect with God, is by recognizing the I am within yourself. It becomes this personal, internal experience.
Like when someone calls your name, you respond. But if they call a different name, it's just background noise.
Exactly. He's saying God responds to I am, because that's his true name.
Interesting. And while the Bible uses names like Jehovah and the New Testament links Jesus to that same I amness,
Those are just words, labels. They don't have the same power as the actual feeling, the awareness of I am within you.
this is where it gets really interesting because Goddard moves from interpreting the Bible to showing how this applies to our lives. He tells the story about a man from the Midwest who was worried sick about his mother and brother. They were dealing with chronic health problems, emotional issues, the whole 9 yards.
And at first, the man tried sending them self-help books, hoping they'd read them and change their perspectives.
You know, like when you try to help someone by giving them a book you love, but they never even open it. It's like Ben Franklin said, a borrowed book is often a book unread.
Exactly. And after 4 years of trying, the books just ended up being thrown away. Nothing changed.
Poor guy. But then something clicked for him. He heard Goddard teaching that the whole thing is myself. And he realized he wasn't limited to helping them physically. He could try something more direct, internal, even though they were miles apart.
So he did this mental experiment. He imagined holding a letter from his brother, focused on his brother's handwriting, and the letter said his mother and brother were doing so much better.
Wow, just visualizing it, feeling the joy and relief of receiving that good news.
He did this for 3 weeks, really immersing himself in that feeling.
And then what happened?
He got a letter from his brother, dated February 22nd, saying exactly what he'd imagined. And the next day, he got a letter from his mother saying she hadn't felt this good in 15 years.
No way. So after all those years of health problems, she suddenly felt better just from him imagining it.
That's what makes Goddard's conclusion so powerful. Imagining creates reality. He's not talking about wishful thinking. He's saying that focused inner awareness, that feeling of the wish fulfilled, actually creates the reality.
Okay, so if our imagination is that powerful, how does that connect to Jesus?
Goddard goes even further and says the name Jesus actually means I am. He looks at the Hebrew spelling of Joshua and points out how it implies action, like God in action. He even quotes William Blake, who said, Jesus, why he's the only God, but so am I, and so are you.
That's a pretty bold statement. I mean, if someone told you you were Jesus, wouldn't that be a little, I don't know, blasphemous?
Well, Goddard clarifies that he means God became human, so that humans could realize their own divine potential and become like God. It's not about ego or worldly identity, it's a spiritual truth that he believes everyone will eventually discover.
So how does the end fit into all this? Is he talking about the end of the world?
No, not in a literal or apocalyptic sense. He means the end as the ultimate purpose, the final realization of our consciousness. He explains that God, as the Father, gives himself completely to humanity, which means each person, no matter their circumstances, must awaken to their own inherent fatherhood, their own creative power.
When you say eschatological fulfillment, you mean the ultimate purpose, the final realization of our divine nature, right?
Exactly.
And this fatherhood is revealed through the emergence of the Son, symbolized by David, from deep within our soul. This is the proof of God's gift, and this Son recognizes us as Father, just like those verses in Proverbs, Psalms, Ecclesiastes, and 1 Samuel.
So I am, as they may use in this earthly realm, but ultimately, everyone's true name will be one Jesus. It represents that unified I am consciousness, like in Zechariah 14:9. And that explains those seemingly paradoxical statements like, when you see me, you see the Father, from John 14:9, and David calling him Lord in Matthew 22:42. The I am within each person is the Father.
You're saying that Jesus embodies the universal I am consciousness, the divine essence, which is the same essence within all of us.
Precisely. And eventually we'll realize that our individual I am is one with that universal I am, which Goddard calls the Christ consciousness.
Okay, this is all pretty mind-blowing, but how do we actually apply these ideas in our lives? How do we integrate them into our everyday experience?
Goddard urges us to eat the words, to really absorb the essence of these teachings, but also to let go of anything that's not essential, like literal interpretations that might obscure the deeper meaning.
So we should approach the Bible like a buffet, taking what nourishes us and leaving the rest.
That's a great way to put it. The key takeaway is that the whole Bible, according to Goddard, is about you discovering your true identity as the I am.
And he keeps emphasizing that imagining with feeling is what creates our reality. It's not just about external actions, it all starts within.
Right. Even the warning against lustful thoughts in Matthew 5:28 applies here. It's not just about avoiding negative desires. It's about creating positive outcomes through feeling the wish fulfilled in your imagination. That act of feeling is what sets the wheels in motion.
So what's the difference between, say, divine imagining and just regular human imagining?
Goddard says it's not a difference in kind, but in intensity and focus. Deeper states of inner withdrawal and concentrated attention make our imagination way more powerful, like focusing a flame under a pot makes it hotter than just scattering the light around.
And he links God and Jesus to our own imagination, even referencing William Blake's idea of the poetic genius, like how our dreams feel so real with all the details and emotions. Goddard says in our dreams, we're the author, the actor, and the director of the whole thing.
Absolutely. And during a Q&A, he even shared this story about a writer whose fictional characters started appearing in his real life.
Wait, really? So just by creating these characters in his imagination, they somehow became real people?
It seems that way. It really shows how powerful our imagination can be, even when we don't intend for things to manifest.
That's wild.
It is. And it brings us back to that point about actively testing this principle in your own life. Goddard encourages you to focus your thoughts and feelings towards others, wishing them well, and imagining positive outcomes for them.
So basically, what you send out comes back to you.
Exactly. It's all about cultivating positive energy and expecting positive results.
And God promises that the divine presence, the I am, will stick with us until we're fully transformed. It's a gift, pure grace.
This complete acceptance of God's self also means recognizing his Son and our own fatherhood, our creative power. He says, you are he. You don't know it and I know it. It's a gift. And because it's a gift, everyone will get it.
So everyone eventually will realize their own divinity. That's a powerful thought. And what does that final state look like?
He describes it as being fully integrated into this infinite field of love. symbolized by Jesus, where individuality merges into complete wholeness and limitless potential.
Sounds pretty amazing. So, how can we start experiencing this in our own lives?
Goddard suggests using the same technique that man used with his family. Focus on a specific outcome you want, like receiving a letter with good news, and fully immerse yourself in that imagined reality, feeling it as if it's already true.
And just like James said, the biggest revolution is changing our inner attitudes, right?
Exactly. It's about taking responsibility for our inner world and recognizing its power to shape our outer world.
So, we should keep the desired outcome clearly in mind, using all our senses to make it vivid, real.
Absolutely. Imagine holding that signed contract, seeing that positive bank balance, whatever signifies your desire being fulfilled. He even challenges us to think about how the news we see tomorrow might be influenced by what we're imagining today.
Whoa, that's heavy stuff. So, we're basically in control of creating our own reality, even if we don't always realize it.
That's the point he keeps coming back to. I am he. The world and the people in it reflect what we're doing internally. We're the ones shaping our reality.
Okay, I'm starting to get this, but how can I deepen my understanding of I am?
Goddard recommends digging into the word name in the Bible, using a concordance to see how it's used and what it represents. This will help you build confidence in your own I am.
So we're not just talking about a name on a piece of paper, it's about recognizing the power within ourselves.
Right. And he emphasizes that Jesus isn't some external figure standing between us and God. Jesus represents our own wonderful I am, the God consciousness that's already within us.
And with Easter coming up, he offers a new perspective on the resurrection and crucifixion.
Yeah, he says the real mystery is about life emerging through a kind of inner death or transformation within each of us. The burial happens within our own minds, and the awakening is when we experience everything that was said about Jesus, but on a personal level.
Okay, so how can we practically experience this? Do we need to go on some spiritual retreat?
Goddard gives us a simple technique to try. Find a quiet moment, let go of any thoughts about the past or worries about the future, and create a scene in your mind that represents your desire being fulfilled.
Like imagining holding a letter with good news or seeing a friend succeed, something like that.
Exactly. Engage all your senses, make it vivid and real. Feel the texture of the letter, hear your friend's voice, see the details clearly, then open your eyes and trust your own I am, which is basically God in this context.
So no rituals or complicated practices, just pure imagination and trust.
Exactly. He says the results you experience will be your own proof, regardless of what anyone else believes.
Makes sense. And he talks about the omnipresent nature of I am, right?
Yes. He says wherever you imagine being, that here becomes real in your imagination. I am is always first person, always present. Like if you imagine yourself in Moscow, in that moment, for you, here becomes Moscow.
Wow. So our imagination really can transport us anywhere.
And he ends with a call to action, encouraging us to try these techniques and share our experiences with others.
So we should be talking about this stuff more openly, spreading the knowledge.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The more people understand the power of I am, the more we can collectively shift our reality.
You mentioned earlier that there was a Q&A after the lecture. Anything else interesting from that?
Definitely.
Yeah.
One story was about a professional writer who found that the characters he created in his stories started showing up in his real life. It shows how powerful our imagination can be, even unintentionally.
That's incredible. So even if we don't consciously try to manifest things, our imagination is still at work.
It seems that way. And there's another story about a man who mentally argued with President Roosevelt every morning while shaving. It shows how our inner dialogues and thoughts actually shape the people and dynamics in our lives.
So we should be careful about what we focus on because it can manifest in our reality.
Definitely. Dwelling on negative thoughts or engaging in negative mental arguments can have real consequences.
So focus on the positive, imagine the best outcomes, and trust in the I am.
Exactly. And Goddard also shares this hopeful idea that all imperfections will eventually be made perfect, a kind of ultimate refinement. He also recounts his own experience of being lifted up in a spiral motion, hearing a heavenly chorus, and then returning with this deep inner knowing to share the truth of Jesus Christ as an inner reality.
Wow, that sounds like a powerful spiritual experience.
It is, and it ties into his idea that traditional churches often misunderstand Jesus, focusing on his earthly life instead of the deeper inner revelation. He represents the awakening of the I am consciousness within each person.
And I remember you mentioned a story about a woman who wouldn't attend Goddard's lectures because he was divorced.
Yes, it highlights the difference between societal judgments based on appearances and the deeper spiritual truths that Goddard was teaching.
So we should be focusing on the inner truth, not on external labels or judgment.
Absolutely. It's about looking beyond the surface and recognizing the divine spark within everyone, including ourselves.
This deep dive into Neville Goddard's I Am Called by Thy Name, O Lord lecture has been truly eye-opening. The power and significance of I am as both the name of God and our own true identity is something we can't afford to ignore.
It's a call to awaken to our own divine potential and to actively participate in shaping our reality through the power of our imagination.
We encourage you to experiment with the techniques we discussed. Consciously engage your imagination with feeling and witness the transformative results in your own life.
And finally, ponder this question. If your imagination is the force that shapes your reality, what will you choose to imagine next?